Does Deadpool and Wolverine save the MCU? Is it a worthy sequel to Deadpool 2 and Logan? But most importantly, is Deadpool and Wolverine any good? Here is my review of Deadpool and Wolverine. Hey everyone, I'm K-Swope, and I just got finished watching Deadpool and Wolverine. Here are my thoughts and my review. But before we dive into that, a few disclaimers. First of all, I will be doing this review mostly spoiler free. I will, however, be jumping into a spoiler segment. So first I'm going to discuss the good things, the bad things, and then I will dive into a spoiler version of the good things and the bad things. So hang tight for those. We will put chapters and a timestamp here on the video just to let you guys know if you want to skip through the spoiler parts, and then we will end with a conclusion where I will keep these spoilers out. So diving right in, the good things of this movie. First things first, there are a ton, and I mean a ton, of fan service things, cameos, all kinds of stuff. If you are either a Marvel Comics fan or just a more casual Marvel movie, whether it's the MCU or the Fox Marvel movies, which they get a lot of love in this movie, you're not going to be disappointed. There's going to be a lot of great stuff in there, great things. I can rant and rave about that. There's probably too many cameos and references to count, so I'm not even going to try to attempt that. But what I will tell you, which is my next point, is all the legacy characters in this movie, they are handled very well, and I think very accurate and true to the characters that they were in the previous movies that they were in. So I'm going to highly recommend that. Once again, if you're a fan of the more legacy Marvel movies, I don't think you're going to be disappointed with this one. Like I said before, it was pretty great. The other thing I thought was fantastic in this movie too, specifically, the sound design was really, really good. I really appreciated it. I thought it just very thematic, felt very good and very well, but it specifically shined in two ways. For one, the soundtrack of this movie was absolutely amazing. I can dive into a little bit more in the spoiler segment. I won't get into it right now because I have a lot of thoughts. I enjoy music a lot, so the way they handled music, not just their soundtrack picks, but how they use them in the film, I thought was also very, very fantastic. There is that, and then also the score was pretty amazing as well, because the score, now I think out of all the Deadpool movies, the best score has to go to the first movie with Junkie XL, because I love that score so much. I can't remember how the second one sounds all that well off the top of my head, but this movie, I don't like the score as much as the first one, but I will tell you this, it still takes and adapts, has a really good sound to it that especially fits the scope of what's going on in this movie. So it sounds a little more epic in a sense, a little more grandiose. So I think that's good, and I think that fits really, really well. And like I said too, the score plus the soundtrack and the sound design were all fantastic, and it all worked out phenomenally. So that's what I'm going to say about that. The other thing I'll say too, this movie also functions as a very good send-off, if you will, to a lot of the Fox Marvel characters and things like that. So if you were fans of those movies, this is one you're definitely going to want to see. So I'm going to highly recommend that to you right now if you were fans of those films. The other thing that's fantastic about this movie is the fight scenes were choreographed beautifully. And I want to tell you more about that in the spoiler section. So if you want a specific example of what I'm talking about, go check it out there. But I'm not going to say too much here, but I will tell you that this movie, every time there was fight, if there was action, it just looked really, really nice. Very, very stylized, but not too stylized, if that makes sense. I know that turns some people off. I personally like stylized things a lot, but I also do know that it's not very realistic or practical. This movie also, if you like the previous two Deadpool movies, you are not going to be disappointed because Deadpool is back with his classic sense of Deadpool humor, breaking the fourth wall, and he does some of the craziest fourth wall breaks, I think, in this movie than I've seen him do at all. Because, yeah, there's some moments specifically that are absolutely fantastic. Again, spoilers, won't get into those. Something else about this movie that I like a lot is it is very satirical. And I'm a big fan of satire in general. And so I think that is good. I won't say that the satire is all good, though. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the bad. But for the kind of things they were saying, the points they were making, especially at this present time in terms of how like the MCU is going, things like that. And mostly those kind of jokes. Those I thought were spot on. Those were really fantastic. Really, really good. But I do have some flip side complaints about that as well that I'll get into once we dive into the bad section, and then even more when we hit the spoiler section. So, hold on to that thought. The other thing I will say too, if this is Hugh Jackman's last time playing Wolverine, because I think that's still a little ambiguous at this point, if it is his last time, this would be a great send-off for him, this movie. If it's not his last time, that's okay. We can still bring him back. But I will say, I think a lot of people were worried because Logan was such a good send-off, and it was a really good way to just end Hugh Jackman's career as Wolverine. If Hugh Jackman decides that this is his last movie, last time being Wolverine, I think this will be a satisfying conclusion. I don't think it takes away anything from Logan and how Logan played out and ended, because Logan was also fantastic. Something else about this movie I want to bring up is the messaging, okay? So when I say messaging, here's kind of what I mean by that. Basically, some film scholar out there once said that every movie has to be about something, has to say something, except for Ghostbusters. But that's another topic for another day. I do love Ghostbusters, by the way, so no hate on them. But what that means is every movie needs to say something, needs to make a point, if that makes sense. This movie, I think it does something really interesting with the messaging that I don't really want to get into in this spoiler-free segment. Moving on, though, the bad. This film is going to be dated very soon, and here's what I mean by that. Diving back into the satire, there are a lot of jokes and things in it that have to do with the state of the MCU right now. And I think if the MCU bounces back, which it very well could, or they can work out certain things, things will change. I really think that if you watch this movie, let's say your kids like 20 years from now are watching this movie, there's going to be a lot of stuff that they're not going to get that's going to go way over their heads, because at this time, if you have your ear to the ground, you know what's going on with Marvel and everything like that in the MCU. You're going to get it, and it's going to make sense, and you're going to be, haha, that's funny. That's kind of how I was watching it. But a lot of these issues that they make jokes about, I think, are going to be sorted out. And if they don't get sorted out, they're going to be lost to time. And like I said, that's just not good filmmaking, I think. Because if you want to make a good film, it needs to last. If you make it too current and too trendy, if that makes sense, I think that's generally a bad thing. And I think most of the best TV and movies that I consume, you can completely forget when it came out, and everything will still make sense and still be fantastic and work. This movie, I don't think, can do that. And like I said, you watch this movie in 20 years, your kids watch this movie, I think it's going to be way over their heads. I don't think this movie is going to last that long, if that makes any sense. Next bad thing. I feel like the editing at certain times is really choppy. And what I mean by that is this. So I feel like there would be parts in the movie where a character says something and then just kind of hard cuts to them doing something, when the way that the shot and the scene feels like it's set up, it would feel more natural for a character to respond. Now, I know Wade Wilson, Deadpool, right? He's known as the Mark with a Mouth. So he talks a lot, and, there's a lot of talk about that in the movie. So I can't help but feel like there was a Deadpool line in here somewhere, and they just kind of cut it out or threw it away or whatever, and instead just kind of go into whatever the action is. So yeah, I remember thinking about 2 moments in my head where those kind of scenarios played out, and I just thought to myself, this is kind of, something's missing here. I don't know what it is. When deleted scenes come out one day for this movie, I'm sure that's something that was just left on the cutting room floor, but we'll have to see about that. But yes. The other thing, this is my last non-spoiler complaint about the movie. It wasn't very story-rich, wasn't very story-heavy, which is not a good thing. Now, you might think to yourself that the first 2 Deadpool movies aren't either, and they're not very much. But this movie, I just kind of felt like watching it. It feels more like the plot is just a means to get certain characters together to do certain things. Felt like fan servicey in that sense. So yeah, I can get a little more into that a little bit later, maybe into the spoiler section. But for the meantime, I will leave it there. Not very story rich. But ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving into the spoiler section of this review. I'm going to give my good and bad, but with spoilers as well. So, if you want to avoid those spoilers, right here, this is the timestamp. Skip to here. I'm going to the spoiler-free conclusion, kind of wrapping all my thoughts up in a bow. So, this is your spoiler warning. We are going to dive into the spoiler section in 3, 2, 1. Good. You're gone. Now, here's what we're going to talk about. The good. The opening scene of this movie was amazing. I honestly loved it. For those of you guys who didn't see it, what he's doing is this takes place at the end of Act 1, where Deadpool is like, okay, I need to find a Wolverine because to save my timeline and stuff. So he decides to go back and dig up the dead Wolverine, which is, from Logan, dig up his corpse, and it's just very funny how it's played out. And then to make things even better, too, that scene then takes us into the opening credits, which is very Deadpool-y. As I mentioned before, I like stylized stuff, and the Deadpool opening credits have always been very nice and stylized. The first movie, it felt more reminiscent of that than the second movie, but still amazing. The second movie almost opened like a James Bond movie, which I'm not complaining about. I thought that was also really good. But this one, they're playing Bye 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 by NSYNC, and I don't know. I feel like it sets the tone very well, plus it's very stylized. And in the movie, what's going on is, for some reason, he's there, he digs up Logan. The TVA show up because they're like, hey, get back here, you can't be doing that. For whatever reason, we don't know at this point in the movie. And then he decides, hey, you know what, I'm going to beat you guys, but I'm not going to use any of my weapons. And all he does is use Wolverine, Logan, right? His adamantium skeleton corpse to beat him up, which some really funny stuff comes of that. The also thing that's going on is he's dancing while doing this, and so intermixed, he's doing moves from the Bye 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 music video from NSYNC, which I did actually watch before this review because I thought he was doing that, but I don't think I've ever actually watched that music video. So I can confirm, yes, he was doing those dance moves, but I can also confirm that the Bye 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 music video by NSYNC is not very good. So, there you go. You've been warned. The other thing, and this ties in again with the music, their use of Madonna's Like a Prayer in this movie, oh man, it gave me chills. Just for clarification, I don't really care for Madonna that much. I do like a lot of music. I do like a lot of, like 80s kind of stuff too. And Madonna I've just never really cared for. When they started promoting this movie with the song Like a Prayer, thought it was interesting, so I was listening to it a little bit more there. Like today, going to the movie, I was listening to it basically on repeat. Because I was excited, I was trying to build that hype. And then when the song in the movie started playing, the best moments in the third act of the movie with that song, so good. Speaking of which, that's going to take us into the next one, which has everything to do with Like a Prayer. When the song starts, if you remember the first official trailer, it's a slow motion sequence. They are on the street and they are walking out like in slow-mo, and the song's starting, it's building up, it's got the like hums in the background, and you don't really know what's going on in the context. But what's going on in the movie is it's kind of the same scenario setup, but what happens is as that part's playing, they're getting ready to fight a big horde of Deadpools from like alternate timelines, dimensions, and whatnot, and it happens, the music, and then right before we think they're getting ready to start, Wolverine grabs his cowl for the very first time we've ever seen him do it and pulls it up over his face, and those chills. Oh man, I'm getting kind of chills again just thinking about it because it was that good, especially fanboys like myself. Just so good. That scene then, that fight scene, that brings me to my next thing too, was totally worth mentioning. I mentioned earlier the choreography for the fights. The choreography for that fight was awesome. So was the cinematography, because what's happening in this scene is you're basically side-scrolling from one shot the whole way over here, and as they're doing it, they're fighting to stay in frame. And while they're doing the fighting, it is phenomenal. The music playing in the back, Like a Prayer, whatever type of sorcery they've done with the sound design, beautiful. Oh man, again, I'm kind of getting, you can't see it because I'm wearing two jackets right now. I'm also very hot, but it is amazing, really good. I get chills just talking and thinking about it. That scene was just amazing. And then the scene at the end too, when they're sort of making the ultimate sacrifice, and the song's also playing. And they're really amping up the kind of like choirs, and the whole scene is just amazing. Both scenes, the scene at the end and this scene right before the end, both oh so good. I cannot say enough about it. But speaking of Wolverine, while still on the topic of that, I will say I think what may have been my favorite cameo of this whole movie was seeing Henry Cavill as one of the Wolverine variants. Because Henry Cavill, I love him. I know a lot of people love him. His Superman was amazing, although he really he got the short end of the stick with his Superman situation. So I'm glad to see him in this role. I know he was a big fan cast. I doubt we're going to see him again as Wolverine, unfortunately, because I'm pretty sure they're going to do the same thing here that they did with John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic, because those were big fan casts at the time. And they did it just for the fan service, I think, of it all. But I don't think they actually plan on bringing Henry Cavill in as Wolverine. But if they did, I wouldn't be complaining. Like I said before, big Henry Cavill fan. And I want the best for him. I want him to get those jobs, get those gigs. But yeah, so great things going on there. Great things. Last good thing I want to talk about is this. I mentioned the messaging of the movie earlier. And in the messaging, it's kind of weird. The best way I can describe it to you is like this. If you watch the trailers, you would know there's a joke in it. It's kind of throwaway. At least I thought it was going to be a throwaway joke about Wade Wilson, Deadpool, being Marvel Jesus, right? I thought just making a Deadpool-style blasphemous joke, yada, yada, yada. Didn't think too much of it. And then I watched the movie, and as I'm watching it, I'm like, hold on a second. He's kind of mirroring what Jesus did in this movie and kind of how that situation works. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So Deadpool is just doing his thing, and the TVA just show up and they bring him in and they say, hey, Deadpool, we have chosen you to join the MCU. We are going to kill your timeline off. And Deadpool's like, what? No. So then he goes rogue to try to save his timeline, which eventually meets him with Wolverine. And then the whole thing happens. And so he's basically fighting to save his people, right? Similar to what Jesus did. And then at the end of the movie, too, he's willing to make that ultimate sacrifice to die, to cease to exist, period, in order to save his timeline and save the people that he loves. So in that idea of, for one, being chosen by some type of higher authority with someone who is their chosen one, who saves his people. Very similar to how like the Matrix and stuff works like that too. But I think that archetype, that story kind of came from Jesus, of course. Which I think is awesome on one hand. But on the other hand, I don't really understand why and what they're trying to do with it. As I said before, I don't really understand what the messaging of this movie is supposed to be, what it's trying to say. Now, if you disagree with that Jesus analogy or a metaphor that you just heard me say, feel free, let me know in the comments, because I really want to know this kind of thing. Because the movie just came out, I could have missed something. Maybe I'm saying something here that you may have missed. I really want to encourage that type of discourse. So, feel free to read a comment, drop a comment below, and I will definitely take a look at that. The other thing I want to talk about, we got kind of the bad things I want to talk about now of this movie. And I think that's a good transition into these. But, first things first, as I mentioned, very dated, the references in this movie. Here's the specific instance that I want to bring up for you guys. There's a sequence in it where they're driving toward the evil base, right? And Blade pulls out this, this is Wesley Snipes' Blade, by the way, which is awesome, by the way. Pulls out this RPG rocket launcher device, whatever. And they say how they got it from Punisher. And I think it's Deadpool then says, which Punisher? There's been like 5. And then Blade, right before he shoots the rocket launcher, goes, there's only ever been one blade. And he shoots it, and it's a cool moment. But then Deadpool kind of turns as like a Jim Halpert look to the camera, which is, of course, a reference to the Marvel Blade movie and how it's kind of been in development hell for the past however many years. Keeps losing people, stuff like that. But the thing is, I do believe that movie will come out eventually, and when it does come out, there will not be just one blade, and then that joke is kind of going to be like, years from now, misunderstood. People aren't going to get it. Again, I don't think that's going to age well, which means the longevity of this movie is probably not going to be there. I don't think it's going to last. But we'll have to see, I guess. Only time will tell. The other thing that I really didn't like, there's two more things, but this one I got a lot to say about. I really don't like how they made Wade and Vanessa break up between this movie and Deadpool 2, going backwards. Because I feel like from the events of the first two Deadpool movies, they locked them in so hard as a couple. And I think their reasonings for having them split up are kind of stupid, honestly. Because they talk about it, they have... How should I describe this? They explain it why they break up, but that just feels really out of character, I think, for Vanessa to be not really mad at Wade, but like not willing to go on with their relationship because he's not doing anything heroic at the moment. Like, was he doing anything heroic when you first met him, when you first fell in love with him? Because no, he really wasn't. So I don't know why all of a sudden she's willing to break up this relationship over the fact that he's not doing anything productive or heroic, because it's not like he was earlier. So I think that, honestly, was really stupid and just kind of straight up bad writing. That's my, I think, biggest plot complaint about this movie. It was worth bringing up. Again, I really didn't like them. They do kind of hint at the end that they might get back together, but, like, I don't know. I feel like they wrecked a good thing. And plus, Vanessa, too. From the first movie, I think she was a very interesting character, and she was fleshed out pretty well. And then in Deadpool 2, they fridge her, and they make kind of a big deal about that, and a little bit of a meta joke, especially in the PG-13 Once Upon a Deadpool cut. They talk about that a lot. And then it's kind of like, haha, I get it, it's kind of funny. But I was kind of hoping in this movie we get a little more Vanessa and kind of get to see how her and Wade's relationship kind of is and works, and not really. She's not even in the movie for that much, and she's also only in the movie for character motivation, which is kind of the same reason she was in Deadpool 2, which we also agreed was kind of disappointing. So, I don't know. It'd be different if in the first Deadpool movie they kind of set her up as a character that's not super deep, who exists solely just to motivate the hero, and then they do that for the next two movies, and it's like, okay, that makes sense. But in the first movie, you go through all the hassle of setting her up, making her a character that we care about, that we want Wade to save, and then in Deadpool 2, you fridge her, which, again, it wouldn't be the end of the world for me until, in retrospective now, we have how she's used in this movie, plus how she's used in Deadpool 2. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like she just deserved a lot better as a character, and I don't really like the way that they did her in this movie, which kind of makes my opinions on how they treated her in Deadpool 2 even worse. So, I'll leave that there. The next thing, and the last thing that I'm going to say, is they did not definitively put Deadpool in the MCU in this movie, and that kind of sort of makes me mad, because I'm pretty sure that they made it quite clear when promoting this movie that this was going to be Deadpool being pulled into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that did not happen. There was the TVA, there was that kind of thing, but at the end of the movie, he was in the Fox universe when he started, and then he ended in the Fox universe. So, I don't understand what the heck is going on. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, he could come back, of course, but he could also not come back, so I don't know. I really hate how they left it like that, because I felt like this movie was supposed to be a big launching point. We're going to take Deadpool into the MCU, and with him, we're going to have our first few mutants in the MCU. With the exception of Miss Marvel, who I do believe is some kind of mutant. I didn't watch the series. I have no idea. That's what I'm told. So, that's what I was expecting to happen. I was expecting that it was going to conclude. There was going to be that, and maybe he would be able to save his friends from his universe, and they'd come with him to the MCU. Marvel's done that in the comics before, like with kind of like what they did with Miles Morales, because when they moved him into the mainstream Marvel universe, they reset a lot of things. Like, it was his mom that died in the comics. She came back, but then also they brought back all of his friends, like Genki and stuff. He now exists in the main universe too. So there are instances of the comics of them doing that, but I was expecting something like that to happen, and now I honestly have no idea when or if we're going to see Ryan Reynolds Deadpool again. So I don't know. Very disappointed in that regard. Again, a little mad about that, but I also don't really know what else to say about it at this time. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to bring me to my conclusions. Overall, I had a good time watching this movie, don't get me wrong. But, is this movie objectively a good film? I don't know about that. But, to answer our questions that we asked at the beginning of this video, is Deadpool and Wolverine a worthy successor to Deadpool 2 and Logan? I would say yes, it is a worthy successor to those movies. Will it save the MCU? No. And for that reason, I said at the end of the spoiler one, I'm not going to go into that, but I do not believe this movie is going to save the MCU. I think the MCU still has a ways it needs to go. It's fighting what seems to be a little bit of an uphill battle right now, but they're going to need more than just this movie to try to save face. So hopefully they got some good ideas, some good things up their sleeve. Now, final question, the most important question. Is this movie any good? To which I would say yes. But specifically if you watch it sooner rather than later. Because like I said, a lot of the jokes in this movie are going to be dated. And a lot of the satire as well. So the sooner you watch this movie, probably the better. If you want to get the most enjoyment out of it. But that being said, that is my review of Deadpool and Wolverine. I like to rate all my reviews here on a scale from 1 to 10. 10 being it is the greatest movie I've ever seen. 1 being it is the worst movie I've ever seen. Please cut my eyes out. This movie, I think, will safely fall into a number 7. Therefore, I give it a 7 out of 10. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, that concludes my thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you saw anything in this video that you agreed with, didn't agree with, whatever that might be, feel free to leave a comment below. Again, the movie just came out at the time of me recording this and posting it, so there's a lot to discuss at this moment. A lot of people probably haven't seen it yet, so keep that in mind. Feel free to like this video as well. Subscribe for more. I have plenty more ideas for reviews and things coming out shortly. Some really, really exciting stuff. But I want to thank you guys all for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.